It would be a nightmare for anyone to suddenly become enclosed in a dark, humid corridor that was only 2 feet tall, with little to no breathing room. Crawling in the vents was a claustrophobe's personal hell. It's moments like this that I wish I was a cat, Marshall whispered, slowly creeping along. What? Why? Zuma asked from behind. The kitten catastrophe crew give us enough trouble as it is. Yeah, but at least I'll be able to see in the dark, the Dalmatian grumbled. Chase gently barked from the back of the line. How's it going up there, Rocky? I can't see 2 feet in front of me, the mix said, breathing loudly as he tried to slow his heartbeat. If there's a sudden drop, I'm dead. Zuma could be heard grunting in discomfort. He was unable to stand up straight due to how low the ceiling, forcing him to either awkward crouch or keep his head low. Both options resulting in soreness of the body. It's so hot in here, Marshall inquired, as he shuffled along. In the beginning, the vents were cozy and warm, and as the dogs were finally getting out of the freezing rain. However, that got cold fast as the heat only increased to unbearable conditions. Would you prefer being outside with the Verox Malls? Chase fired back, slightly agitated. The lab in the middle raised an eyebrow, looking back slightly. It has a name? Yeah, didn't I mention it a few hours ago back in the tower? Well, you did shoot Sky, so we probably a little distracted, Zuma bit back. Rocky's ears perked up as he remembered something. Looking back, and his voice shook. Wait, that's right. You said Sky was the one infected. Why did it come out of rubble? Chase's heart stuttered as his heart skipped a beat. They were starting to catch on to his lie, and he grew uneasy as his excuses became less and less convincing. Yeah, she was, he said, quickly. But it probably jumped bodies. It can do that. Jump bodies? Zuma asked as he continued trekking through the darkness. How? I don't know, the shepherd snapped. It's a fucking giant creature of death. How am I supposed to know its fine details? Okay, zeesh, the lab waved off. I just thought maybe you would know. Zuma quickly diffused the situation, but his suspicions were ever increasing. A chilling voice from the back of his head was telling him that Chase wasn't being entirely truthful. Ugh, we've been in these vents for a long time, Marshall heaved. It's really hot. Shouldn't we have been in the tower by now? Rocky spoke up. I saw in the blueprints. It's a pretty big network of ducts. The Dalmatian emitted with an annoying whine. But why? Why do we need such an expansive vents if it's just one tower with just one top floor? It isn't, Chase replied from behind. There is a boiler room down below, and the breaker box had labels for the basement. Shouldn't Ryder have told us all this while he was here? That's what I'm thinking too, actually. Chase flattened his ears, looking to the ground. Rocky suddenly stopped, causing them all to bump into each other as the movement halted. Chase had rubbed his nose as it collided with Zuma's tail. Ow, Rocky, what the hell? I see light, the mix exclaimed. Sure enough, the dark interior slowly illuminated as they sped forward, revealing each dog as they approached the source of light. The mix, being in front, walked up to what he assumed him to be an accessible vent cover that would lead them up inside, but tilted his head in confusion when it was something completely different. What is it? Zuma tried to stick his head out to the side for a better view, but grunted as he hit again against the metal wall by accident. The narrow corridors of the vents were getting increasingly uncomfortable. It's a ladder, Rocky said, leaning down to sniff it. It leads down. A ladder? Chase spoke up. Why is there a ladder in the vent system? Maybe it was for the construction workers, Marshall shrugged. Like when they were building it? I'm sure Rubble would have known. Well, if there's light coming from the bottom, I would say go, Shepard nodded. Wait a minute. Zuma turned around to face Chase, which was difficult with the enclosed space. We don't know what's down there. What if we end up trapping ourselves down here with no way out? There is a way out, though, Marshall inquired. There's a ladder. Zuma growled in frustration. Okay, fine, but what if that's the only way along out? If the Verox Malls, he made their air quotes with his paws, comes down here, we'll be sitting ducks. I say we keep moving on this path. Chase narrowed his eyes, meeting Zuma's attitude with the same intensity. Zuma, Clearly there's power down there. Where else would the lights be coming from? There could be even supplies down here to help us. I agree, Rocky turned back. I'm with Chase on this. The lab turned to face Rocky, flashing him on a look, then quickly looked to Marshall. Well, Marshall, what do you vote on? Looking up in surprise, the Dalmatian expression twisted into confusion. Vote, he said, with an anxious tone. Why does it have to come down to me? Zuma, you can't just put Marshall in the middle of like that, Chase said, defending his friend. No, it's fine, the firefighter gave a shaky breath. Let's just take a ladder. Rocky nodded in confirmation as Chase slightly glowed in victory. Zuma had to put his head down so low so no one would see him quietly snarling in agitation. The mix carefully aligned his paws into the ladder and climbed down to the best of his ability. He was expecting a difficult climb, as dogs weren't built to use ladders the way humans did. But then it came to an interesting discovery. Hey, it's slanted, Rocky piped up as he climbed down. That's what makes it easier. Wait, really? Zuma asked in confusion. Yeah, I'm guessing the tower was built by construction dogs, the mix chuckled, like rubble. But why wouldn't they have taken the ladder out after the tower was done? Zuma asked out loud. That thing is bolted onto the wall. It's almost like they're expecting dogs and vents to be a normal occurrence. This is all so confusing, Marshall muttered, as he watched Rocky make his way down and walkway, and then he took his turn to climb onto the ladder. Maybe they're like maintenance vents? We're supposed to climb up in them to fix things? No, if they were, we certainly would have been using them for the several years we lived here. The lab shook his head. Why are the entire secret passageways under our tower? And why did Ryder never tell us? Chase added. Zuma turned around again, this time holding his gaze upon the shepherd. Chase held his ground, sitting back, and returning Zuma a look of stern face. I've always wanted to do this. Marshall suddenly smiled and gripped his paws on the edge of the ladder, gently loosening the grip as he slowly dropped, sliding down the ladder in style. Zuma flicked his eyes back, making sure Rocky and Marshall were out of earshot, then turned to Chase. You know it's upsetting me on how much you're pinning Ryder as dishonest, he began. Chase merely shrugged off Zuma's protest. Do you have any other explanations? His fur bristled a little. I'm just trying to see all possible angles, and it's certainly upsetting me how much attitude you keep giving me. Zuma bit back a snarl, fighting to keep his claws received. Chase, he said calmly, what is your problem? What is yours? The shepherd dodged the question. I'm trying to lead here. Didn't you almost die? The lab raised an eyebrow. I'm not so sure if your sanity is intact, but given everything that's happened. Excuse me? Chase flattened his ears, offended. I'm just being honest. Zuma held his ground. Maybe someone else should leave for a change. The police dog stood up slightly, his head pressing onto the low ceiling. Don't you get to make that decision. Says who? Zuma challenged. His fur began to bristle as well. The shepherd fully bared his teeth. Says me. Guys? Marshall's voice echoed from below. You two coming down? Zuma stood, neck leaned against his back as he absorbed Chase's hostile response. For a moment he felt himself unhinging, as his own feral instinct screamed to defend himself. It was only the sound of Marshall's voice that he shook his head. Calming himself down, he sighed and turned towards the ladder, climbing onto it as Chase watched him with narrowed eyes before he descended. As he turned to Chase for the final time, "We are not done," he growled, and then he slid down at the same fashion as Marshall. The shepherd bristled quietly. Zuma was becoming defiant, something he understood but couldn't let slide. It wasn't the lab's fault he couldn't understand why Skye was killed, or why they were put on lockdown, or now being shoved through a cramped vent. Chase sighed. All the hostility was making him exhausted. In this time Zuma would come to understand he had to. As much as they were butting heads now, Chase still loved the lab as a brother, but as much as he did like the others. As Zuma vanished, Chase took his turn and climbed down the ladder, reaching the bottom and dropped into a small room. Where are we? Rocky said, looking around. The room was tiled with dirty white flooring. The walls were lined with cracked drywall that reeked of mold and water damage. There was only one door installed in the opposite of the ladder, meaning they weren't trapped. Chase could feel victorious over Zuma yet again. Rocky nudged at the door with his paws, but it only opened a few inches before it hit a mystery object that had been placed in front of him, blocking them in. It seemed hopeless at first, but Rocky noted that a strong enough push would likely knock the object away and get them through. "This door leads out. We just gotta get a good push," he announced to the team, then spotted a large object covered by a sheet. Metal gas canisters in each one corner nearby the door, presumably carrying either propane or straight gasoline. Zuma walked over and examined them, seemingly turning the gears in head. A knocked-over chair was lying on by the floor of the wall, possibly meant for a more formal location, before it was bumped into the ground. The walls themselves were covered in draping wires and metal pipes, and slithering along the wall and turning into the ceiling. Chase wandered over to an overturned box in the corner of the room. Spilled out onto the floor were various pieces of old tech, mainly consisting of broken wires of what he assumed that were pieces of pup packs. After rifling through the pieces, he came across the 2 small radio tags, complete with chips to attach them to his collar. Chase recognized them as unused pup tags, missing emblems that would be pasted on their front. "These should come in handy," he nodded to himself. "What is this, some kind of supply room? Marshall wondered. "Guys," Rocky called, "there's a computer in here." All 3 heads turned to the mix, who was gleefully gripping the sheet in his teeth and pulling it off, revealing a large table and a computer set against the wall. It wasn't flashy, recent technology, but certainly not entirely old. It consists of a flat monitor with a long cord running both into the wall and into the control pad before it. In place of what would be a keyboard, Chase quickly walked to the other side of the room where the chair stood and grabbed it by its leg and dragged it closer. With Marshall's help, they stood up and pushed it onto the table, where Rocky jumped on it for a better view of the screen. "This is awesome," Rocky wiggled in the seat. "I've never been allowed on furniture before." "The screen, Rocky," Chase reminded him with the exasperated tone. "The screen." "Oh, sorry." The mix looked forward at the computer screen, placing his paws on the table, and he was at hit wave of confusion. "What kind of computer is this?" He tilted his head. "And where's the mouse?" The screen was pitch black, likely not on, but if the lights were down here, then surely the computer had power also. The control had resembled a keyboard, but was completely different from anything he had seen. The pad himself consisted of several buttons, none of which were labeled with letters but symbols. The only recognizable set of keys were the arrow keys to the right. Looking down at the buttons, they were labeled with small red squares on the surface, each one with a different number on it from 1 to 20. "What is this?" Marshall asked from below. "I'm not sure yet. Let me see." Chase stood up on his back legs, trying to climb on the chair. "There's a red button on the far left," Rocky noted, scanning the odd keyboard. "I'm not really sure what any of this does." As his curiosity took over, Rocky reached forward and pressed a random button. The screen flickered to life, revealing a large linear map consisting of lines and arrow passageways. Several squares were dotted around it, likely key points of interest. Rocky struggled to understand. "Wait a second," he started going eye-wide. "This is the map of the vents." "Really?" Chase exclaimed, then jumped on the chair, shoving forward to get his own look and nearly knocking off Rocky in the process. "Does it say how we can get out of here?" Zuma asked from down below. The mix stumbled. Then Chase pushed onto the chair. "I'm not sure. None of this is really labeled. Except that," Chase pointed at the bottom of the screen, revealing a plan that deviated from the main route and ended in a star symbol. "I'm guessing that's where we are." "If that's us," Rocky narrowed his eyes, moving his paw along the map, "then this must be the route we just took. See? It starts from a dead end. That must be outside." "Well, then that's what's all this." The shepherd leaned back, taking the full map, winding corridors and pathways that seemed to be a stretch for dozens of yards around them. "Why does this tower need all this?" "Your guess is as good as mine," shrugged the eco-dog. "I'm still trying to figure out what all these squares mean." Chase took a step closer to look, squinting his eyes as he stared into the screen and spied the numbers on each of the squares. "They're all labeled, just like the buttons. The mix put his paw on his chin, taking it over. Looking down at the number buttons again, he spotted the button with the label 15. Find it on the map, the squares associated with it, so by the right of the ladder. Wait, I think I know what this is. Rocky came to a slow realization as he hit the button, causing the square light to light up on the map. Is it something that can help us? Zuma was heard again. This is a vent locking system, the mix concluded. All the squares are meant to be areas you can seal off. To drive home at the point, you would have to point the red at the outside gate selected, and after a few seconds, all 4 dogs heard a small whirling noise, and a hatch fell over the ladder, sealing them in the room. We're safe, the mix barked in elation. Okay, cool and all, but why is that thing even in here? Marshall looked up at the ladder, seeing that the way out was indeed blocked. We can add this to our weird things we were finding in the tower. Chase rolled his eyes. Rocky spun around, addressing the group. Know that this is a thing I've actually seen before. Vent sealing systems are generally common. People use these to prevent mold and mildew buildup. Zuma looked around and noted the green sludge that was crawling down the walls. Wow, I can now see how effective this is. His voice was dripping with sarcasm. It hasn't been used in years. What do you expect? The mix said in an unamused tone. Hey, at least with the entrance closed, we're safe down here. Marshall nodded. Right? Chase took his own look back at the map, trailing his eyes along the routes when he spotted something that he wished he hadn't. Nope, he said, simply pointed his paw. That ladder isn't the only way in. There are other branching paths that lead around us, likely into other rooms that we're connected to. Connected? The mix glanced at the computer again. Are we in the basement right now? I guess so, Chase nodded. I never knew we ever had other floors. The shepherd looked around to see Marshall's blue eyes looking up at him. Can't you seal them off as Rocky said? The Dalmatian asked hopefully. Not these, the shepherd shook his head. These paths either don't have available seals, or they do, but can be worked around. So we're not safe down here. Zuma rolled his eyes. Told you. Chase was getting tired of the lab's quips and whipped his head around to snap at him when the loud sound rang that silenced the whole room. All 4 dogs froze when they heard it. Even with their brief moment of solstice that they were shaking with their fur, heavy footsteps trudged through the ducts above them, passing over the ladder. It's followed us in, Rocky quivered, stepping down from the chair. Chase followed them with the sound of his ears, tracking as the Ferox mauls moved above them, traveling deeper into the vents, fear thrived within him, knowing that the creature all had to do was wander into one of those particular paths, and it had dropped right into the basement with them. Not to mention the only possible weapon they had to fight against the Ferox mauls outside was being able to see and know where it is. Now in the dark, tight caverns where the vents are, the entire area was shrouded in darkness. It could only be heard from the footsteps. It was completely visible within the ducts. It's going to get in, Marshall backed up, one way or another. Rocky remained on the floor. He suddenly stood up. Unless, he said, swiftly brighten up, we trapped it. The shepherd in his chair quickly caught wind of his friend's plan, evident to his widened smile. With the gates. Do what? Zuma walked over. Chase gleefully looked back on the computer screen. Ferox mauls just went past us. Means it's going along here. He trailed a paw down the lower path. If we could somehow lure it between the gates and seal them, we could trap it in the vents. The lab looked for something to say, but he couldn't admit that it was a good plan. That's actually genius. But didn't we smash through Rubble's kennel? Wouldn't it just break through the same way? We have to try, Chase said with a slight desperation. Hopefully we can keep it long enough before it even realizes it's trapped, and it didn't have to smash through the kennel until I figured out it was closed in. There are any gates to close each other? Marshall asked. A determined expression on his face, too, was getting into it. Well, no, Chase admitted with a grimace. But there is a map as looking as whole as if we close off here, and... He eyed around the map, holding a paw. Here and here, it will lock up the 4th area, and it won't be a small trap, but a trap regardless. And since they're far apart, Rocky said, It won't realize it's trapped until it's gone down every possible route. Great, Zuma nodded. But how are we going to lure it in? The room was met with silence. Marshall slunk back as Rocky jolted in surprise. Zuma still with his head high. Chase looked down, thinking of a moment until he observed his mud-dried paws. Zuma didn't want any of his friends to risk death again, certainly not after the fiasco in the courtyard. Rocky was destined to prove himself to the others, and as much anxiety was holding him back, as a part of him was pushing to be the one to enter the darkness. Rocky sighed. All right, I'll go. Chase cut him off, jumping off the chair. Wait, what? The mix looked down at him. Chase, you've been through enough. Marshall recoiled at the shock of Chase's volunteering, visibility showing signs of distress. Zuma merely narrowed his eyes, steadying Chase's movements. All the more reason for me, the shepherd shrugged, picking up the blank radios from the box. I've tangled past against it, already may as well go again. What? No! Rocky shook his head, jumping down to him. Chase, I'm not letting you go! The police dog grimaced, facing Rocky. Oh, would you rather Marshall went, or you? The mix had to think for a moment, glancing to the side before holding Chase's gaze. I'm willing to face it. Rocky, no! Chase shook his head. I'm going, and you'll need this. He flicked a small tag through the air, letting Rocky catch it. These radios are new, and are linked to another, instead of our servers. And that works? Zuma raised an eyebrow. Even with all others out? Hence why they're closed channel, the police dog pointed out. These radios will work as long as I don't stay too far away from you. How far is too far away? Rocky asked, looking down at the colorless pup tag. The shepherd hesitated, his mind drawing a blank. I guess we'll find out. Sighing in resignation through an accepting possible fate within the dark quarters of the vents, Chase equipped the radio on his collar and walked over to the ladder. Marshall tried yet again to plead him away, tears in his eyes, powerful enough that Chase had to turn away from the Dalmatian to keep his own emotions check. One last look at the closed friend's face, and he'd never leave. But it had to be done. With a sick feeling in his stomach, he walked over to the ladder and reached up to the steps. Rocky, he began, open the way. The mix sighed, lowering his eyes as he made his way back over to the computer, reopening the gate as he previously activated over the ladder. With every way open, Chase climbed up, feeling the cool air from the basement die away into the heat as he emerged from the ladder and climbed into the darkness. You can close the ladder now, he said to his radio. Chase, it's still in time, Rocky said through the voice through. You don't have to do this. Close it. After a moment of silence, a horizontal path panel activated, sliding the ladder and sealing the path. All light in the vents was cut off, but Chase knew that he'd be able to navigate with Rocky's help. Now completely separated from his friends, Chase took a deep breath and braced himself, and punched his paw through the wall as hard as he could. The impact sounded like a deafening sound, echoing through sheet metal, radiating through the vent system. Sure enough, after a few seconds, he could hear the distant sounds of movement approaching him. He was locked away in a maze of pitch-black corridors, now actively being hunted by a vicious, unrelenting predator. There was officially no turning back now. All right, he said to himself, let's do this. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.